I started today's video by setting out to find the rarest shiny color. A lot of assumptions could be made. Some of the coolest colors out there like blue and black could be the rarest. I wouldn't be surprised if green ended up being the most common shiny color, or even pink. But what do the facts say? I meticulously went through every home shiny sprite, self-categorizing each individual Pokemon to provide you that very answer. But before I get too ahead of myself showing off pretty graphs with colors and numbers, I have to explain just how I'm gonna sort them. If we sort the colors by rainbow, we'd leave out the shades black and white. But what if they're more of a silver color? Where would those end up? Instead of creating my own list of colors to sort Pokemon into, I decided I would just steal the official Pokemon colors that already exist and try to sort the shinies into those colors, like some sort of artistic Hogwarts sorting hat. And that in itself presented its own problem because I discovered pretty quickly that there's no orange color for official Pokemon colors. Like, I was genuinely confused at first and racking my brain trying to put Metapod in either red or yellow when I discovered that Game Freak was kind of cracked. Orange is just another word for brown. And with those logistics out of the way, we can finally look at some pretty graphs until we get to Pokemon like these. Okay. One final ground rule. To stay as consistent as possible, I tried to sort Pokemon by their main body's color change. If the main body didn't change color, then I selected another color and hope it made a good chunk of sense. Now we can finally get to Generation 1. Here we discover that, yes, in fact, there are a lot of bad shinies in the early generations. They all come from Generation 1, with over a quarter of its decks being some kind of putrid green shade. All other shinies colors make sense, with the only outlier being the black shiny Charizard, who was modified from its original purple hue. And Generation 2 is where the majority of pink shinies originate, because again, a quarter of the decks turns into a bright pink color that really burns out your retinas. I was surprised by the amount of good blue shinies that came out of Generation 2. Because blue shinies are some of the best out there, I thought it would be a rare color. And then I remembered there's a lot of bad shiny water types that still stay blue, so then it started to make a bit of sense. Bumping up a generation, we get to Generation 3. Where we return to the color green reigning supreme. However, a lot of smaller shiny colors get to shine for the first time in this generation, with red, black, and gray all getting a noticeable amount of new shiny friends. The trickiest Pokemon for me to sort in this generation was hands down Flygon, because its main body doesn't really change color. I hope you're okay with me saying it's blue. I'm sure when you think of Generation 4, you don't think that it would be dominated by yellow. But that's the world we live in, and even Arceus gets in on that action. It's interesting to note that the new evolutions in this generation for older generation Pokemon stay within the exact same shiny veins, with my favorite blue shiny from Gen 2, Yanma, evolving into a deep, vibrant blue Yanmega. Though you could say shinies were being deliberately colored starting in Generation 4, in this Generation 5, it really feels like Game Freak is handcrafting a strong selection of these shiny Pokemon. Crazily enough, blue wins with a dominant 20% of the decks being that shiny color, with my personal highlight being the starter Emboar, with brown and green right on its coattails. The funny thing about the brown shinies in this generation is that a good chunk of them are actually just straight up orange. Generation 6 has by far the smallest pool of new Pokemon in any Pokemon generation so far, but every Pokemon feels like it got special attention with their shinies. Perhaps that's due in fact to each one being handcrafted because of the shift to 3D models. But instead of some interesting color being at top, it ends up being brown. Don't get me wrong, bangers like Dedenne and Pangoro exist, but who would have thought that such a boring seeming color would be at the top? With a shocking surprise, an underdog color wins this region. Who would have thought white would win in a region? Well, it makes sense that it won here in Alola because most of the white shinies aren't necessarily a part of this Pokemon world. Yep, the majority of the white shinies are Ultra Beasts, but there's also Incineroar and Golisopod bolstering the white shiny rank from native Pokemon. Here in Generation 8, both Sword and Shield and Legends Arceus new Pokemon and regional variants are counted towards the shiny counter. Personally, I doubt that changed the stats too much, and I feel that the yellow who won got a well-deserved victory. However, did you know there's just a butt ton of gray shinies in these games? And they aren't even metallic robots that appear within the Gen 9 games. They're just straight up gray for some reason. Speaking of the Gen 9 games, have you subscribed to someone today? Apparently subscribing to someone at least once a week is good for your mental health. I personally think that I would be a pretty good option, but anyone would really count. Wait, you want to know why it's good for your health? I don't know, I heard a doctor say it once somewhere, maybe in a dream, so it must be true. Okay, you have earned your final graphs. Here is the Gen 9 spread, with Brown winning like a whole boss. If you disagree, well, the Copper Hammers of Tinkaton says too bad. Blue follows up second, and honestly with the bangers of Earthworm and Clough, that makes me quite happy. Now we need to look at the graph to rule all graphs. The one that answers the questions that I sought to answer when I started this video. After painstakingly racking my brain and looking through all 1,000 plus Pokemon's shiny forms, which color has the most shiny Pokemon? Well, it's yellow. Not pink, not green, little unassuming yellow. And I blame Sinnoh for that. I mean, if the god of Pokemon is the color of a stick of butter, you'd think there'd be a little bit of bias. So of course, that's going to be the most common shiny color in the Pokemon world. I mean, there are some Pokemon in here that are more off-white and a yellow hue that I threw in here because they are the color of butter and I felt that was appropriate. But you could potentially argue that some of them are more white. But I don't think that's going to change the facts very much that there's still a butt ton of yellow. But why the heck was it not pink or green? Those are the shinies that feel the most common. I think in large part that is due to the first 3 generations. I mean, a quarter of Generation 1's Dex was green and Gen 2 was pink. Not to mention a whopping 22% of Generation 3 was also green. Those first 3 generations made a mail order and made the most of it. And you know, those first 3 generations just love showing up in consecutive games over and over and over again for at least 6 generations, you know, making their presence well known even though pink and green are rarely touched on for modern shiny colorations. Interestingly enough, blue and brown, which have more shinies than pink and green, rarely get any flack, just showed up to work every generation. Sure, they didn't always top the charts, except Brown. He did it twice. But they've consistently been second and third in almost every single game across the generations. Looking at the rarest color, yeah, it's black, unfortunately. Personally, I was hoping it would be a different color, like red, which is also very low in shinies. But red's probably that low because most colors that are reddish end up in the pink amalgamation. Yes, black has increased a ton over the generations, but it's still reserved as kind of the cool guy color. But I would personally love to see more straight up red shinies in the coming generations. And I think that's about it for this video. If you liked it, give it a like, otherwise I'll see you guys all in another video. Bye!